SSUSH6 by Ethan Huston
and Alex Scheid.
George Washington. George Washington served as the first president of the United States from 1789 to 1797. He is known for setting many precedents during his presidency that many future presidents followed. Some important precedents set by George Washington included forming a cabinet, using the title of Mr. President, establishing the constitutional authority to enforce laws, and retiring after 2 terms in office. Washington figured other people may have more experience in different government areas, so he decided to form a cabinet. Washington appointed Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State for his diplomatic experience, for example. Then, the cabinet only had 4 people, but today, the cabinet is made of 16 people, including the Vice President. To this day, the precedent he set of creating a cabinet is still used by presidents today. George Washington also set a precedent as to how to address the president. The Constitution did not specifically outline how to address the president. Washington set the precedent of being called Mr. President, rather than being called Majesty or Excellency. Washington didn't seek a 3rd term in his presidency, which set another very important precedent. When Washington first went into office, tensions grew in Europe, and France and Great Britain were once again at war. Washington's presidency also brought booming trade from Great Britain to the Americas. Overall, some precedents Washington tried to set did not survive, which included the opposition of different political parties forming, and the opposition to formal alliances forming between countries.
Entering his presidency in 1796, John Adams had already amassed a great reputation as he served as a patriot leading up to the Revolutionary War. He was a participant in the Continental Congress, and he was even a part of the Committee of 5, whose duty was to draft the Declaration of Independence. His administration was affected by conflicts with France and Great Britain that greatly diminished the nation's economy. In order to keep the Democratic-Republican Party under control, John Adams passed the Alien and Sedition Acts. This law extended the citizenship requirement of the naturalization process from 5 years to a long 14-year process. This extended naturalization process prevented Thomas Jefferson from receiving support from immigrants. The alien portion of these acts gave the executive branch the power to deport any immigrants they find to be dangerous. The Sedition Act portion of these acts made it illegal for citizens to conspire against any laws created by the United States. The Alien and Sedition Acts proved to be very unpopular in the United States. As a result of the hostility towards John Adams after his term of presidency, he ended up losing the election of 1800 handily. The final results of the tally resulted in a 73-vote tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. Thomas Jefferson ended up winning the tiebreaker and became president in 1801.
Thomas Jefferson served as the 3rd president of the United States from 1801 to 1809. Thomas Jefferson was a huge advocate for the Democratic-Republican Party and strongly opposed the Federalist movement. This means he favored a less centralized, involved government. Overall, Jefferson led the United States to prosperity while expanding presidential power. During his 2 terms of presidency, he dealt with many domestic and foreign policy issues. The Democratic Republicans, like Jefferson, believe in a strict interpretation of the Constitution, while Federalists believe in a much looser interpretation. Jefferson advocated a stricter interpretation of the Constitution, while sometimes his actions showed a much looser interpretation. The Louisiana Purchase is an example of an expansion of presidential power. Jefferson wanted to purchase the port of New Orleans to secure a permanent port on the Mississippi River. France decided to sell not only the port, but the whole territory for $15 million, which ended up doubling the size of the United States. This purchase, which was not specifically condoned by the Constitution, was an example of how he expanded presidential power.
James Madison. James Madison played a major role in the development of the United States, as he was the main author of the United States Constitution. Madison also served as Thomas Jefferson's Secretary of State during his presidency. He even contributed essays to the Federalist Papers supporting ratification of the Constitution. When Madison was elected as the fourth President of the United States in 1809, tension was mounting between America and Great Britain due to foreign policy. Madison had yet to figure out he could dodge an expensive war with Great Britain, yet still improve the United States economy with international trade. Britain's war with France often caught America in the middle of everything, as American ships were often seized by France and Britain. In 1812, America declared war against Great Britain. The reasons for this war: America refused to restrict trading with France. They were also outraged with Britain's policy of imprisonment. Americans also believed that Britain was supporting Native Americans during the American fight against Native Americans. America was also planning on conquering Canada to drive Britain completely out in order to keep North America completely British free. America won the war when America won the Battle of New Orleans with a casualty count of 300 for Americans compared to Britain's 2,400 casualties. The War of 1812 ended the Federalist Party as the Federalists failed to support the war. Instead of hurting the economy like most wars, the War of 1812 actually stimulated America's economic growth. America also became a superpower as they had now defeated Great Britain twice, so they were more feared among other countries. James Madison took the challenge of war head on and brought forth an era of strength. James Monroe. James Monroe served as James Madison's Secretary of State during his presidency of 1809 to 1817. James Monroe handily won the election of 1816 due to James Madison's previous success, and began serving as president in 1817. There was a great unification across America, as the Democratic-Republican Party was the main party of America. This era is often referred to as the era of good feelings.
Monroe clearly defined the United States foreign policy. With European countries planning to capture colonies in the Western Hemisphere, Monroe made it clear that the United States would prevent that from happening. This was known as the Monroe Doctrine, which included Monroe's desire to stay neutral in the wars between European nations. Big idea. George Washington was the first president and probably one of the most influential. He created important precedents, including forming a cabinet using the title of Mr. President, establishing the constitutional authority to enforce laws, and retiring after 2 terms in the office. During James Adams' administration, the Sedition Act was created, which made immigration to the United States very difficult. This unpopular act resulted to him losing the election in 1800. Thomas Jefferson expanded presidential power by purchasing the Louisiana Territory, then further exploring it. This expansion doubled the size of the U.S. James Madison led the United States to declaring war on Great Britain in 1812. With a second defeat to Britain, this established the United States as a world superpower. James Madison created the Monroe Doctrine as a way to prevent European countries from capturing colonies in the Western Hemisphere. And that was the big idea.